The time for putting all of our previous work into practice is finally here. This part will be all about building the UI and splitting it into multiple readable and maintainable widgets. Hello, welcome to ResoCoder, where you are getting prepared for real app development by building better, faster, more stable apps. So subscribe and hit the bell if you want to grow your coding skills. The UI we currently have in our number trivia app is just the default increment a counter example, but what we are going to have at the end of this last part is the following, which you've already seen in the first part of this tutorial course. So we will have a text field with two buttons and then a message text, and we can input a number here. And then we're going to have another text displayed at the top containing the number itself, and then the actual trivia text will be below it. And of course we can also get random trivia and it's going to do the same, and actually this text here is also scrollable. And be sure to check out the written tutorial from the link in the description, where you can also find all of the code written in this video and overall go through this lesson at your own pace. We are going to create a new page under the features number trivia pages folder. So let's create a new file, call it number trivia page.dart. And let's just create a blank version of it for now, and then later on we are going to add stuff to it. So let's create stateless widget number trivia page. Of course, we need to import material impm, import Flutter material, and we are not going to return a container, but rather a scaffold. And let's just for now set up an app bar on it, which will have a title text, which will say number trivia. So now comes the time when we change what's happening inside main.dart from the default counter app to our own page. So let's actually just delete everything which is currently present inside main.dart, apart from the main function, of course. And we're going to create a new material app, which will say, of course, let's just delete this import and main. I'm using awesome Flutter snippets if you're wondering. And if you wanna know which extensions for VS Code you should definitely use as a Flutter developer, check out the video from the card in the corner. We're gonna return material app from it with the scaffold not specified right over here, but we're going to say number trivia page will be the home of our material app. So this is the page which we have just created a while ago. Let's import it and let's change the name here to say number trivia. Now I have launched the app, so this is how it currently looks like. Let's add some theming to this material app, and of course it's going to be ResoCoder style theming, so it's gonna be the green color. So theme, let's set it to theme data, and let's just set the primary color to be colors.green, and let's make it shade 800. We could also make something like 800. It's gonna be the same, but let's just set it to shade. That's more explanatory. And then also we're going to have accent color, which will be colors.green. And let's set this one to shade 600. And with that, we can move on to the number trivia page. In clean architecture, the only communication pathway between UI widgets and the rest of the app is the presentation logic holder. And in our case, the presentation logic holder is a block. But of course, I'm not going to stop beating the dead horse and say that you can use any other state management solution out there, whether it's MobX, Redux, change notifier with a regular provider, whatever. You can use it completely fine with clean architecture because it's not dependent on your state management solution. The presentation logic holder is basically a trivial thing once you get the rest of the architecture correct. But regardless of your preferred state management method, you still need to provide your presentation logic holder throughout the whole widget tree. And for that, obviously, we're going to use the provider package. But since we are using block, which is actually integrated with provider, and you can check out the tutorial dealing with that from the card in the corner, we're going to use a special block provider, which has some nice block specific features. In addition to the app bar, a scaffold can also have a body, and we'll want to provide the block over to the body and to all of the other child widgets which are going to be instantiated inside that body. So let's say block provider. Actually, we can use a snippet coming from the extension of VS Code. So let's import Flutter block. Inside this builder function, we're going to just return the block which should be provided down the widget tree from this block provider. Actually, we do not need the context, so we can just make it an underscore, and the block which we want to provide is obviously the number trivia block. But we're not going to instantiate like this, because that is completely wrong, since we need to provide dependencies and all of that. That's precisely why we have registered all of our classes and their dependencies in the injection container file right over here. So now we want to get this registered instance factory, we are going to call this factory, from within our number trivia page, which is going to resolve in turn all of its dependencies, and it's going to kick off the resolving of all of these, like this whole dependency tree. We can do that by calling SL, which is actually from the injection container file. And we're going to just specify number trivia block to be the type which we want to get over here. And with that, all of the dependencies will be also resolved. Before reacting to states emitted by the number trivia block, and there can be empty, which is currently being emitted, the empty state, then there is the loading state, then loaded, which is going to grant us the number trivia which we are interested in, and finally there is the error state, which we're going to handle by displaying an error message. Before doing all of that, let's first build out a basic UI outline using placeholder widgets. So the root of the UI will be a padded and centered column. If we take a look at that, it's a column because we need to have this top half and the bottom half, because the top half is concerned with output to the user, so it's going to output some text, and the bottom half is concerned with input. It's going to have a text field and also the search button and the random button. So we're going to first replicate that with placeholders. Let's just first extract the body of the scaffold into its own method. So we're going to say build body. So the child which we are going to have here will be a column, and this column will have children, which will be a container, which will represent the top half of the screen. So the stuff where the messages are displayed and the number trivia is displayed. So this container will have to have a fixed size, a fixed height to be precise. If we take a look at that, no matter how long the number trivia is, so for example, if it can scroll, or even if it's shorter so it cannot scroll, the bottom half stays at the same place and we are still inside a column. And for that, we need to fix the height of the top half of this display of messages, because otherwise the bottom half would start jumping around. For example, now it would be a bit more downward. It would be pushed downward because naturally, without fixing the height of this top half container, the longer text of the trivia would try to expand the container to fit its content. So because of that, we're going to fix the height of the container, and let's just fix it to be the third of the size of the screen. So we're going to say media query of context, which we currently do not have inside build body. So we're actually going to pass in context, and of course it's build context. And let's just pass in context to build body invocation from the body of the scaffold. So now we want to get size, of course, and its height, and divided by 3. So it's going to be the third of the size of the whole screen. And now the child will be only a placeholder. So it will look something like this. Of course, we do not want it to be flush with the top of the screen under the app bar. So let's just provide some sort of a padding in the form of a size box. So size box height, or FSZH. I have an extension of VS Code. It's called Flutter Widget snippets. So if you want that, just install this extension in VS Code. And with that, you're going to be able to use those shortcuts. So the height should be 10. Of course, after we provide a comma here, it's going to be pushed a bit downward. After this, we want to have another sized box with height of 20, because now comes the bottom half of the screen, sort of, which will be concerned with the user input. So this will contain all of the text input fields and the buttons. So it's going to be another column. This one will not have a fixed height because the height will not be variable. It will have just 3 widgets inside of there. And it needs to be a column because we need to stack the text input field and the buttons below each other, and then the buttons will be inside the row, of course. So let's do just that. We're now going to implement it only with placeholders, but of course we're going to change that later. Bottom half, and let's put a column in here, which will have children, and those children will be a text field, which currently will be only a placeholder. But because this placeholder would not be constrained, otherwise it would just overflow this whole thing, we need to provide a fallback height. Let's just set it to 40. So now it's going to sort of represent the text field. Now for the next widget present inside this column, it will be a size box, so FSZH. The height will be 10, and with that we have a size box over here, below which we are going to place those 2 buttons. And because they are besides each other, we're going to place them inside a row. So this row will also have children. And now there are going to be placeholders again. And we're again going to need to fix their height to be 30, for example. So let's try and look how it looks like. And it's definitely not looking any good. It overflows, and the whole button is sort of unbounded because it's only a placeholder. Let's just try to add another placeholder besides it. And even if we fix their width, so fallback width will be, I know, maybe 100 is a good width for the button, or maybe 200, not 2000, but 200, all right? And we would do the same thing for the other placeholder. Is not a good way to do things. Even with the real buttons, we will now want to specify their width manually. We want to let them expand to whatever width they want to be, and also to whatever height they want to be. So for that, we're now going to specify fallback width, but instead do something row specific. We're going to wrap these placeholders, which represent buttons. So the same thing which applies to placeholders will also apply to buttons later on in this part. So we want to wrap them with a new widget, and that widget will be expanded. We want to do the same thing with the bottom button, which will be for the random trivia. So wrap with a new widget, expand it. And with that, after we provide commas here so that it's nicely formatted, it's going to be looking good without any overflow. And now another size box, but this time for width. And the size of the box will be 10. So we're going to have 10 logical pixels in between the buttons. But still, this whole column is not looking great because it's flush with the sides of the screen. So we want to provide some padding. So we are going to add padding. The padding will be not 8, but 10. And now we cannot see it because we are using placeholders, but later on we can have some problems that the contents of the column, its children, will be on the left side. So let's just, to be safe, center this whole padding. So we're going to say center widget. And now this outline of the UI with placeholders is finished. Let's now deal with the top half, and then we're going to move over to the inputs in the bottom half. So inside this top half, instead of having a placeholder, we'll want to react to different states emitted from the number trivia block. And according to the state which is currently present, we will want to display different UI. So for example, loading state will display a progress indicator, error state will display an error message, and so on. So building out different widgets according to the current state which is present in the block is possible with Block Builder. So instead of this placeholder, let's add a Block Builder, which is actually also a snippet coming from the extension block for VS Code. And over here, we need to specify our number trivia block and also the state. So number trivia state. So let's actually import the barrel file for our block. Oh, and of course, we do not want to put this into the container, but we want to make this block builder to be the widget wrapping the container. So the top half will be comprised of the block builder, which from it will return the container with the fixed height. So let's just replace this default container with that one. And now the child will of course still be only placeholder. We're going to fix it later. Just let's put a placeholder here so that we can reformat the code. So nothing changed yet, but we're going to get there soon. And now we are inside the builder method of the block builder, which provides us with a state. And to react to the type of the state emitted from the block, we're going to do some simple type checking. So if state is empty, which is the default state, which is currently actually present, then we want to return a container, which will simply say text. And over there, we're going to say start searching. All right, now of course, this text is not looking great, but we can see that it works and the state, the initial state of the block is indeed empty. This thing here is already becoming quite messy, so let's refactor it by extracting the container into its own widget. We're going to call it message display. And this message display, which is now present at the bottom of the file, will be a stateless widget, but it's not always going to say start searching. So instead of providing a hard-coded string in here, which still would work by the way, but instead of this, we want to have a string message. So final string message, and we're going to pass that into the constructor. So at required this dot message. And with that, we're going to display the message and pass in start searching as the message from. Of course, it's not working because data is null, so of course. So we need to pass that message over to the message display. And now it's going to work. All right, now let's actually style this message a bit. We do not want it to be just this small. We want it to be a bit bigger. So we're going to set the style, which will be a text style containing only font size, which will be set to 25. All right, and let's just make it aligned. So text align to be center. You could see that it moved a bit to the left. not by much, but it did move. And also, to make this text scrollable when it's a bit longer, we are going to wrap this whole text inside a single child scroll view. So let's wrap with a new widget, single child scroll view. And now if the message becomes a bit longer so that it doesn't fit into that third of the screen height, which we've specified right over here, it's going to be scrollable. In addition to that, let's just wrap this single child scroll view inside center, just to make it also centered on the vertical axis. And now we are cool. And this message display does not need to only display the start searching message when the state is empty, but also if an error is emitted from the block. So if state is error, we can also display the error message. So we're going to say, again, return message display, and it's not going to say start searching, but instead it's going to say state, which is now smart casted into being an error, which contains a message. So now if the user inputs ABC, which is not a number, we're going to return the failure, invalid input failure, and that is going to be propagated through the block into a nice message being displayed. Now, technically, we could use the message display even for the state being loaded. So else if state is loaded, we could use that message display, of course, and pass in the state dot trivia, which is the number trivia dot text. But we also want to display the number nicely. As you can see in the example app, we want to display the number at the top. So because of that, we cannot just use message display even for displaying the loaded state. We're going to handle it a bit differently. For now, let's just leave this loaded clause empty. We're going to get to that later. First though, let's handle the loading state. So else if state is loading, in that case, we just simply want to display a circular progress indicator. So let's immediately put it into a loading widget. Let's extract that. We're actually going to just copy the message display widget, because still even the circular progress indicator needs to have a fixed height. Otherwise the bottom half would start jumping around because of the changing height of the top half. So we're going to just copy that message display below. Let's just call it loading widget. Let's rename that constructor. It's not going to accept any arguments apart from the key, which we can leave in there. And of course, it's not going to be scrollable, but it's still going to have a fixed height to be the third of the height of the screen. And the child will be simply a circular progress indicator. And now we can use this loading widget and instantiate it over in the loading state. So return loading widget. Now let's go on to displaying the actual trivia, which is the most important part of the app. We're going to create a new widget, trivia display. So let's actually again just copy message display, paste it all the way down. We're going to call it trivia display. So let's change all of that. And of course, the constructor parameter will be number trivia, which is the entity. So let's import the entity. Let's just call it number trivia and make it be able to be passed into the constructor. So number trivia. The height will still be fixed, but instead of returning just the single child scroll view, we are in addition going to also return it inside a column with the number being on the top like this. So the message will still be displayed, and the message in this case will be coming from number trivia.text. But in addition to that, we're going to wrap this whole thing, this center widget, inside a column. So wrap with a column. And now the first children or the first child to be grammatically correct, will be a text. And this text will contain only the number of the number trivia. So number trivia.number, of course, we need to convert it to string. And then the style, which will be text style, will have font size of 50. So it's going to be 2 times as large as the message, the trivia. And then we're also going to specify the font weight, which will be font weight dot bold. And with that, we've just basically added a bolded text above the message, which is also present inside the message display widget. But let's actually test and see how the UI looks like right now. So we are going to just always return the trivia display from the top of the builder and just specify a made up number trivia. So we're just going to specify number to be 1 or 12, and the text will be ABC, just for testing purposes, of course. Or let's actually make it a bit longer. So we're going to say start searching, and paste it over here multiple times. I know it looks horrendously, but let's just test it. So we have just created number trivia, and we are always returning this trivia display. So what's going to happen is that the bottom overflowed by 36 pixels. Why is that even happening? Since inside the trivia display, we are wrapping the text inside single child scroll view, right? Well, yes, but in addition to all of this, because we are now inside a column, an additional column, in addition to the main column, which holds the bottom half and the top half of the screen, we have a nested column basically. And to make this center, which contains the text view, only take up an appropriate part of the screen and not to overflow, we need to wrap the center inside expanded. So let's wrap with a new widget, expand it. And now all of the overflow will be gone, because this expanded widget will calculate the appropriate size, in this case height of the child widget, which is the text, which it should take up so that it doesn't overflow its container. And in this case, the container is a column. Or I should probably not use the term container because that's a widget, but I hope you know what I'm talking about. It's not going to just overflow the column with the expanded widget. All right, so now we can stop testing with just some made up trivia, and instead we're going to return trivia display. Let's just delete it all. And this trivia display will be returned from the loaded state. So if it's loaded, let's return trivia display and specify the number trivia to be coming from state.trivia. All right. So with that, we have the top half completely implemented. And of course, you can get all of this code from the written tutorial from the link in the video description and go over it at your own pace. And over there, there's also the whole project on GitHub available. So, all right, we've already done a lot to keep these widgets maintainable by extracting them into their own classes. But there is one more thing which we can do, and that is to add them into their own files so that the number trivia page.dart file will not become just one long mess. So let's do just that right now. We already have the widgets folder created from the first part inside the presentation folder. So let's create new file, and we're gonna create new files for every single widget which there is. So let's start off with the message display .dart, and while we are at it, let's also create all of the other files. So it will be trivia display .dart, and similarly, let's just use the advanced new file extension. So we're going to create loading widget .dart. So this is created here. And also we're going to create a barrel file so that we can import all of the widgets from this widgets folder in just one import. So let's create widgets.dart. And now let's first export all of the other files from the barrel file. So loading widget will be exported, then also export the message display and export the trivia display. And with that, the barrel file is done for now. And now we're just going to grab the message display from the number trivia page right over here. We're just gonna grab it, cut it out, and put it over to the message display.dart after we import material. So let's do just that. Now we have message display done. We can close it off. Similar thing will happen with the loading widget. Let's cut it, paste it into loading widget.dart after importing material. Done. And finally, the trivia display widget will be also extracted. So we can immediately see that the number trivia page is becoming more manageable. So let's paste it into trivia display after we import material. And also, of course, we need to import number trivia entity. With that, we can now come to number trivia page and hit Control and dot and import only the barrel file widgets.dart. And that in turn will import all of the needed widgets. So we are importing only the barrel file. Now for the bottom half, which is going to receive input, because we are using block, we are going to dispatch events whenever a button is pressed. Because we are going to be using a text field, which needs to hold some local widget state in order to function properly, let's right now even extract the bottom half into its own widget. Let's just call it trivia controls. So let's change this from a stateless widget to be a stateful widget because it's going to hold some local state because of that text field. That's because we are gonna need to store the string present inside the text field as a state variable. So let's create string input string. And let's replace this first placeholder with the actual text field. Now the text fields work in a way that we are going to provide an unchanged callback, which is going to grant us a value present inside the text field. And when this is called, we are going to simply store the value, the changed string value present inside that text field inside the input string, which we are going to use from the button presses. All right, and after hard restart, the text field is visible in the UI, but it's looking pretty horrendously in my opinion. So let's add some styling in the form of decoration. So the decoration will be input decoration, and we're just going to set the border to be outline input border. So it's not going to have underline, but instead an outline. So immediately it's going to look much nicer. And let's just also specify some hint to the user what he should do with this text field. So we're going to say input a number. Cool. But this, apart from the bottom being overflow, which we are going to fix next, there is also another problem, and that is that we can also input A, B, C even from the keyboard. We want this keyboard to be only numeric. And for that, we are going to set the keyboard type to be text input type, and not number with options, but just number will suffice. And now we can see that we can only input numbers. Let's now move on to the buttons. They're gonna be very simple. Still, they're gonna be wrapped inside expanded, but instead of being a placeholder, it will be simply a raised button containing a child text search. Of course, this is a string, and then the color of the first button will be coming from the theme, so theme of the context, and it will be the accent color. So it's going to be this nice green Of course, this is going to only pop up once we override unpressed, because otherwise it's disabled. So now we can see that it works. And of course, the text theme should be displaying white text. So we're going to say button text theme dot primary. What's that going to do is that the text will be white. There are also other ways to change the text color, but this is the simplest one here. And now inside unpressed, we're going to want to dispatch an event to the block, but we're going to come to that later. Let's just for now focus on the next raised button, which will be for the random number. So let's copy it and paste it instead of the placeholder. We're going to say get random trivia. Its color will not be accent, so it's going to be just a regular number, nothing fancy, or a regular button. I'm already going crazy with all these numbers. And from unpressed, we are going to want to dispatch the concrete event or the random event respectively. But just to make it more clean, we're going to extract that functionality into their own methods. So we're going to create void dispatch concrete. Which we'll simply call block provider. And block provider is an inherited widget, and just like with any provider, we need to get it from the context of the widget. And of course, we need to specify the type which we want to get. So the type of the block which we want to get is number trivia block. Of course, with lowercase r. And with that, we now have the instance of number trivia block, and on it we can dispatch an event, and that event will be get trivia for concrete number. And here we're gonna pass in the number string, and that's cool because if this was an integer, we currently have only a string here, and we would need to perform the conversion from a string to an integer and also the validation that it's not negative integer inside this widget layer. And that's not a good practice. You should never put logic into your widgets. That's why we have that input converter class, which is going to handle the conversion for us. And here we just pass in the string, so input string. We do not care how it's converted over here. We're just dealing with the raw data, with the raw input data with the string. All right, so now let's specify dispatch concrete to be the function being called from unpressed of the first raised button. And with that, shall we test if this works? Of course, there's some minor bugs in here, but let's just ignore them for now. But when we input a number, it will be stored inside this input string. And we hit search, we see the number trivia, so that's cool. But wouldn't it be nicer if this number got cleared up after we search for it? Because now we input 1, 2, 3, search, and it still stays there. So if we want to input another number, we need to delete it and input a new one. And that's not a good user experience. So what we can do for that, we need to clear the text field. And this can only happen when we have a text controller. So we're going to create final controller, and it's going to be equal to new instance of text editing controller. And now we can specify this controller on this text field. We no longer need this command actually. So the controller will be our controller coming from the class. And now, before dispatching the event over here, we're going to call controller.clear. And with that, after we input a number, 1, 2, search, it's gonna be cleared automatically. All right, now let's move on to get trivia for random numbers. So we're going to have to dispatch random. Let's just copy it below this function. Dispatch random will be its name. And here we're just going to change get trivia for concrete number to get trivia for random number, which doesn't take any arguments, of course. And we're going to call it from the onPressed of the random button. But also it would be nice that in addition to pressing the search button, we would also initiate the search with this check mark, which currently does not happen. So in order for this check mark on the keyboard directly to work, we are going to, what's going on here? We are going to overwrite another property on the text field, which will be onSubmit or onSubmitted. So onSubmitted, which takes in a value, but we actually do not need it because all we want to do here is to call dispatch concrete, which gets the value from the stored input string. And with that, we can now test it. So if we hit this button on the keyboard, it's going to search for the number. We can also still hit the search button. And also we can now get random trivia. So that's cool, but still there is a problem because the bottom is overflowed by 57 pixels whenever the keyboard pops up. We can fix this pretty simply by wrapping the whole body, so this build body of the number trivia page, we're going to wrap this inside single child scroll view. And now when that's done, we can input a number and the UI will move a bit up. But also in addition to all of that, let's just fix this horrendously long number trivia page again by moving trivia controls over to its own file. So let's just copy or actually cut them out or together with their methods. So let's extract that, cut it out, and we're going to create a new file under widgets called trivia controls.dart import material and paste that over there. We're going to also need to import Flutter block, then also our own block. So block.dart, the barrel file, so that we can also use the events without importing any additional stuff. And with that, we can now add these trivia controls over to the barrel file. So export trivia controls. And now number trivia page already imports the widgets barrel file, so that's cool. We also have access to trivia controls. And with that, after we just do hard restart to be safe, we can now input the number still. 12 goes there, 42 goes there. Again, 42 with the search button works. Get random number trivia works. And with that, we have just successfully implemented this whole number trivia app with clean architecture. So in these 14 parts of the clean architecture course, we've gone from an idea to a working app. And you learned how to architect your apps into independent layers, how to do test-driven development, discover the power of contracts, you learn dependency injection, and much, much more. So the number trivia app we've built may be on the simpler side when it comes to its functionality, but what's important though is that there are the principles which are present in every single app which you build with clean architecture, because what you learned in this course is applicable to all kinds of circumstances, and I truly believe that you are now an overall better developer because of this course. So practice the principles you learned here and build something awesome with them, right? To go through this tutorial at your own pace once again and to get all of the code and all of these widgets and extracted widgets, check out the written tutorial available from the link in the description, where there is also a link to the GitHub repository containing the finished project. And if you don't want to miss more tutorials and courses like this, definitely subscribe to this channel and also join the notification squad by hitting the bell button to make sure you grow your Flutter skills, because here on ResoCoder, I am determined to provide you with the best app development tutorials and resources out there. If this video and also this whole clean architecture, test-driven development course helped you, give this video a like and also share it with other people, other developers who will surely benefit from it too. Leave a comment if you have anything to say, any suggestions or questions or really anything else, and see you in the next video.